All right, my name's Adrian Crenshaw. Talk you're here to see is dropping docs on darknets, how people got caught. So we're going to talk about some famous case history on various people who have been using TOR or some other anonymizing systems and have gotten busted still. By the way, in all these cases, none of it was a flaw in TOR directly. It was all bad OPSEC. Well, I'll cover what they screwed up. Basically, we'll talk about how people got de-anonymized. And the first case I want to talk about is the Harvard bomb threat. Did you all hear about this last year? Yeah, guy at Harvard apparently mailed and said, hey, we got some bombs. Here's the exact thing he said. Shrapnel bombs placed in Science Center, Server Hall, Emerson Hall, Thayer Hall, 2 of 4. Guess correctly, be quick, or they will go off soon. Before they go off soon. So he sent this on December 16th. Well, they had to figure out who this guy was. Apparently what he used was Gorilla Mail, and up in the headers, well, the email address, it would be from Gorilla Mail, so they could tell that. And apparently he sent it over TOR. Now I sent my own message using Gorilla Mail, and one of the things Gorilla Mail does is it uses your originating IP address. By the way, that's not mine, I've modified it some. But it puts in your originating IP address. So let's say if you did it from home, your real IP address would be in that mail. And they could look in the headers and find it. Now this guy did use TOR, so it didn't have that in there. It had an IP address of a TOR server there. So that was a step in the right direction as far as anonymity is concerned. However, all TOR nodes are public, and it's easy to figure out, oh, is this machine TOR or not? You can just look it up. There's a reverse DNS of sorts that you can use to figure out if it's a TOR node. A lot of times these TOR nodes even have TOR in the name of them. So it's easy to correlate who was attacking. Well, basically what they did was they looked to see who was using TOR during the time that the email was sent. And they found this one particular individual. Now this guy had been using a bridge, as I mentioned before, that wouldn't have been advertised in TOR's directories. He probably would have got away with it. Or if he just walked to the local coffee shop and used TOR, he probably would have got away with it. However, he did it from the university network. So they found this guy named Eldo Kim, and apparently he was one of the few people on TOR at the time. Now at Harvard, I don't know what kind of research Harvard does into anonymity. I give a lot of talks on anonymity for someone who can hardly say it. But he may not have been the only person on TOR, but when they found out he was one of them and they went and talked to him, you know, he admitted to everything, and apparently he put in the bomb threat, my understanding, because he wanted to get out of like a final or it would be a final at that time of year. So he sent that in and is in huge trouble just to get out of a final. Oh well. More details. All is technical, by the way, has some great write-ups on all these cases. Check those out. Also, there's some court documents out of ScriptD. These slides, by the way, are very close to this exact version. Should be on your DEF CON CD. Also, I have them online.
So this guy was Harvard, he did it out of his own network?
Yeah, he did it from the Harvard network. Yeah. Probably from, I think maybe from his dorm room. I don't remember the exact location.
This guy went to Harvard doing it from his dorm room.
Yeah.
That's smart.
So lesson learned from this. Don't be the only person using TOR on a modern network at any given time. Use a bridge. If you'd used the bridge, probably wouldn't have been caught. Don't do it in the first place. That's the other thing. Yes, don't admit anything. That would have gone a long way. And correlation attacks are a bitch. And we'll talk a little bit about what a correlation attack is here in a second. Essentially, what a correlation attack is, you watch the traffic and see what's going on. For instance, let's say everything is encrypted, but if you see a 5 meg request, which would be a big request, but still, and then go out and you watch both this node and this node. By the way, you can tell these two are evil, right? Because it's got the little goatee. A show me kind of met a guy named Ralph. He looks like my evil computer, I swear to you. But anyway, these guys are sniffing it. So this one and this one, in what's known as a civil attack, someone controls both those nodes. Well, he can sit there and sniff and say, oh, I saw 5 megs come in this way, 5 megs come out this way. I saw an 8 meg response come back. Wait a second, that's not what I meant to do. Yep, see the 5 megs go out that way, 8 megs come back this way, and he can see them both. Now, granted, remember those 3 levels of encryption there? So the messages don't look the same because they have extra crypto keys in the middle, like this guy's. The guy I'm pointing here. Why am I doing that? It's not a touch screen, Adrian. Yeah, right, this guy right here. So, I mean, the traffic doesn't look the same. It's encrypted with different keys, but since it's the exact same size and the timing of it, they have a good idea that, oh, this might be who it is. Now, in this case, the correlation attack was who was using TOR at that particular time. Timing correlation might be similar. Pain in my buttocks. All right, let's see if this thing will crash again or not. Ah. I got my stuff together here eventually. All right. Shift F5. F in because it's a freaking Macintosh. Okay. So that was the attack I was mentioning before, just looking at traffic. There's also timing attacks that could possibly be done based on when the traffic is coming through. And there's been some work on people trying to DDoS part of the network to say, okay, I know it's coming through here. If I DOS that and I can put, well, if I can force a certain pattern to the traffic, you might be able to recognize that down the chain. Now, the attack that they were doing with the relay early, if I understood what they were doing some kind of tagging attack that they didn't expect to be people to be able to do. But basically, you want to do something to the traffic to make it visible down the line to know who was talking to who. That could be like DOSing certain boxes. Like if I know certain boxes are out there on the internet or Tor, I could try DOSing this one. Do I think that's the server? All right, did the server go down? All right, maybe that wasn't it. Try the next one and so forth. Or just DOSing something along the path and try to induce a pattern in the traffic. If you're one of the nodes along the way, I guess you could post the traffic yourself. Or even just change the load on a path. There was something called a Maginot. Not Maginot, that's the French firewall company. No, it's history buffs. Thor from Camo Comics. What's the name of his hammer? Mjolnir. They had this project called Mjolnir, I believe it was the NSA, and it's, from what I read of the documents, it sounded a little bit like this, causing extra traffic along the way so you can kind of modify and put like a pattern to the data. I could be misreading it. If someone from the NSA wants to talk to me about it, I'd love to hear. Also, I really want an NSA challenge coin and a little hat, please. Just saying. All right. Another thing, this is not a correlation attack, but I remember I mentioned how sometimes you can really screw it up and you set up the browser yourself. By default, let's say you set up Tor in Firefox yourself, not using the Tor browser bundle. There's a setting that says use DNS over the SOCKS proxy. That is by default off. If it's off, what happens is when you query polyesterroad.onion, it will first do the DNS query to your own ISP's DNS servers. So they won't see the traffic, but they will see that you were trying to go to that particular site. That's why if you're going to set up yourself, you got to go in and it's underneath about config, it's something like proxy relay to DNS. But Tor browser bundle by default does that. So that's another reason to use Tor browser bundle. So while they don't see the data, they can see who you're trying to visit based on the DNS queries. Okay, next case, lulsec. You remember these guys from a couple years ago, right? All right, Hector Xavier Monsignor? How do you pronounce that? Well, I'm going to call him Sabu because Sabu's easy for me to remember. Now, normally he was using Tor to connect to the IRC network, and so they wouldn't necessarily know his home IP. But one time he got lazy and he didn't connect. So he got himself caught and started to collaborate because he really didn't want to go to jail. Matter of fact, last I heard, I think he got off completely now. I think he's pretty much home free at this point. But anyway, he didn't use Tor consistently. Eventually, they found him. And I don't understand, some of these people who do these illegal acts, why don't use something like I2P, which has IRC built into it, and you can do it all over an anonymous network. Because even if you use a cloaking, I can't remember what the terminology is in IRC, a cloak that hides your IP address from other people doing like a right click and who is this, it still is a problem because the person who owns the IRC servers might look at your IP address and figure out who you are. There was actually Ryan Cleary, I think he lives in Great Britain. He was part of the anonymous movement at one time, and he got pissed off at other people in it, and he was running one of the IRC servers, so he just started dumping everybody's IP addresses and who he thought they were on the internet, as I recall. So if they'd all been using I2P and IRC, they probably wouldn't have got caught. All right. Anyway, Hector, there was no guy in lulsec he was speaking with called SupG. Ends up it's Jeremy Hammond, though, at least that's who's suspected, though they didn't know that at the time. And Jeremy let slip various bits of information, like where he had been arrested or detained before, and various political groups he was involved with. And they got a general idea for where in the world he lived. Now, this narrowed the suspect pool down a whole lot, and they finally got enough evidence to be able to get, well, the ability to monitor his internet access. Because it was various things like, I was arrested at this particular location, I've been involved with these particular people. From some of the things he said, made it very clear that he lived in the Midwest, and there's only so many people that fit those kind of qualities and already have a record. So they were able to, narrow it down. Now, Hammond did use TOR consistently, as far as I can tell from what records I've read. And the crypto was never busted. But they were able to use, essentially, timing correlation attacks. Well, calling it attack seems overblown, but timing correlation to figure out that sub-G was always online at the same time Hammond was, and that when sub-G was talking to Sabu, Hammond was in his residence using his internet connection. And while he was using TOR at all times, as far as I can tell, they were able to figure out, well, it seems likely that it is indeed him. A lot more details on Ars technical article, but let's get a few lessons from this one. Lessons learned. First, use TOR consistently. If someone uses it only part of the time, that's going to cause a problem. Now, back in the day when you had to configure TOR yourself, one attack that was really cool to do is to give someone a cookie while they're in TOR, wait for them to disconnect from TOR. If they come back and visit your site again without TOR, you see that cookie and you know who that was. And I actually have a feature on my website that does that. Now, if you're using TOR browser bundle, that doesn't work because it's going to clear out that history every time you shut it down. But yeah, use TOR consistently. Don't give out a lot of personal information. If the guy hadn't released a whole bunch of stuff about, this is where I was arrested, these are the people I was hanging out with, this is what I'm involved in, they probably wouldn't be able to narrow it down to him. Also, correlation attacks are still a bitch. Because of when he was online versus when sub-G was talking to Sabu, they figured out who he was. Case number 2. And by the way, in case you can't figure it out, I'm following the programmer's standard of counting from 0. So case number 2, Freedom Hosting. Now, Freedom Hosting is a company that basically allowed people to get hosting services inside of TOR, so they didn't have to set up their own boxes for a hidden service. They basically used these people's. But they hosted a lot of different things, and amongst them, some child porn-related services. That wasn't the only thing they were about, but that was one of the things they had. They also had some legitimate stuff as well, like TOR mail, I believe, was one of the things that particular group ran. Well, Freedom Hosting had already come underneath attack before because of the whole hosting of child porn. Anonymous had an op a while back called op.net, where they were attacking them and trying to hack the websites, and I think at one point they dumped a bunch of information about who was using them. Just because it's anonymous doesn't mean that the web application on the other end isn't vulnerable. And that's my understanding of how they dumped a bunch of accounts from them. What was that? On July 13th, though, FBI finally compromised one of Freedom Hosting's boxes and decided to insert some malicious JavaScript. There was this bug out. That's the CVE number if you really want to see it. And it existed in Firefox version 17 extended service release. And a recent version of the TOR browser bundle happened to be using that particular version of Firefox, so it was vulnerable. Now, TOR had already updated the package. If all these people had updated by that time, they wouldn't have got caught because they wouldn't have been vulnerable to this. But a lot of people don't necessarily update in a timely fashion. So they had this vulnerability, and they had control over at least one Freedom Hosting server. So they installed this malware using this JavaScript bug, and were able to do some stuff. Basically, they installed a piece of malware called Magneto. And they dropped Magneto on there, and it would phone home to some servers in Virginia, things like the host's public IP address. Some of the content, let me see. MAC address was reported. That kind of narrows it down to the machine. You can do some finagling there. The Windows host name, and a unique serial number to tie the user to the site visit. This sounds kind of similar to the project I think I've read in some of the Snowden documents about something called the Egotistical Giraffe Project, which is a beautiful name. I don't think it's exactly the same exploit, though. I mean, maybe the same exploit, but not entirely the same project, because I'm not sure the FBI and the NSA collaborated that much. But there was a similar thing out there called Egotistical Giraffe. And there was a lot of cases in the past of law enforcement doing something similar, like getting malware installed on someone's machine so they can track them and see what they're up to. Other examples would be Magic Lantern. Fox Acid is another project of, I believe it was the NSA's, and what is it? GBA? What is Great Britain's equivalent of the NSA? GCHQ. I believe that might have been a side project of both of them. I may get this wrong, so, I'm just pointing it out, and if I get it wrong, let me know after the talk. And a CPAB would be another example. Big thanks to Joe Cicero. He gave a talk at ThoughtCon this year that was really good. Unfortunately, it was not recorded. So if he ever gives us a talk on privacy in a surveillance state again, go check that out. He might even be here at DEF CON. I think that was the first time I ever met him was at DEF CON 2009. Anyway, freedom hosting. Eventually, they compromised the box. They were able to place malware on all sorts of people's machines. And so eventually, they thought they knew who was hosting, or who was the head guy in charge of freedom hosting. And it ended up being this Eric Enrique Marquez. He's alleged to be the operator of freedom hosting. Also, they traced him down because of how he did payments. See, he has to buy the service someplace, and they may be running TOR to directly communicate with him, but once they compromise a box and figure out, oh, this is the real IP address, that's who's actually leasing this box. That ties it to him pretty quick. Now, when they busted him, he's said to have died for his laptop to shut it down. That goes back to the whole cold boot attack thing I was talking about. If the machine was shut down, if it has full hard drive encryption, modern crypto, you don't beat it mathematically. You beat it through bad implementation or rubber hose cryptography. Look that one up, it's lovely. In his case, he knew about this, and he was trying to die for his laptop, allegedly, so he can close it down so that they couldn't get the data, but apparently he didn't get to it fast enough. A lot more details and a Wired article on it. Lessons learned from this one. Don't host Captain Picard or Julian Bashir. That's one thing. You're not familiar with 4chan culture, are you? Okay. Let me explain. Julian Bashir is short for, JB and jailbait. Captain Picard, CP, child porn. That's where the names came from. I actually gave a talk a few years back at, I think it was an Ohio Information Security Forum. Maybe that was it. There was some ISSA event, and I gave a talk on Anonymous and tried to explain how Anonymous isn't one cohesive group. It's kind of a banner term, it's a meme more than anything for people who want to go and do a particular thing. And I used a bunch of in-culture terminology, which can get pretty offensive. This whole purpose of people's Anonymous' point in life is to, do it for the lulz and troll people in a lot of cases. So I was using in-culture terminology, and I think the quote my buddy said about me not getting invited back was, well, Mr. Crenshaw's talk was well-researched. It was wholly inappropriate. If you get to know the Anonymous guys in 4chan, you'll get, okay, maybe it was somewhat true. Next thing you can learn, patch. If these people had kept up with the patches, they would have been just fine and dandy because the Tor browser bundle had already been patched by then. Although I don't think they put the warning at the time. Now, if you have an outdated version of the Tor browser bundle that's not too outdated, you'll see a little warning message up near the onion that says, hey, there's a newer version out, you should really update. I don't think they were doing that at the time. Is there anybody with the Tor project here? Okay, I guess they can't answer that question then. I don't think they were doing that at the time. Also, follow the money. Like I said, my understanding is they tied the server to him via how he paid for them. And leave encrypted laptops in a powered down state when not in use. That would have helped out a whole lot. All right. Making a hidden server contact you over the public internet. I'm not sure exactly what Freedom Hosting's problems was, but let's say they had some kind of web vulnerability. Let's say they had a command injection. If you can connect to it, send your exploit to it, even if it's all encrypted and getting there, you can make it contact you outside of the Tor network, depending on what firewall rules are in place and so forth. This would be a little bit harder on something like Tails because they have certain rules in place to keep you from doing that. But if it's just like my old Linux box I set up, use Tor for, and I happen to have a command injection vulnerability, they could do something like ping themselves or do a trace route back and see what the results are and have a good idea of who the host actually is, the real world IP address. That brings us to case 3, the Silk Road. Who else heard of these guys? Okay, Silk Road. Silk Road was something that ran by a guy named Dread Pirate Roberts. And it allowed buyers and sellers to exchange, well, let's say, less than legal goods. There's all sorts of things that they could sell on there. Here's some stuff in the court documents. Cannabis, dissociatives, ecstasy, intoxicants, opiates, precursors, prescriptions of psychedelics, stimulants, all sorts of really fun stuff. Oh, great. What is the guy who would say winning to that? Oh, great. Charlie Sheen, yes, this is Charlie Sheen's dream here. But it also had other things, like various services, like you could hire someone to attack a system for you. You could find counterfeit bills. But then also I saw other policies that said you couldn't have counterfeit currencies. I'm a little confused about some of that. Also, while they didn't seem to have a problem with like stolen credit card numbers and so forth, they had a problem with forged diplomas. I'm not sure what the deal was with that. But anyway, they were making some big bucks. With about 1.2 billion, the FBI got a little interest in these guys. So they started looking around for the earliest references to Silk Road on the public internet. You can use Google operators to say, all right, give me everything from this time period to this time period, this time period to this time period. Just keep throwing that back until you can find the earliest reference to the Silk Road. And, well, they found it on the Shumery. It's a little druggy website. And this guy had posted on it a guide going by the handle of Altoid on 1/27/2011. And here's, well, I don't think I actually have up what he said, but essentially he was advertising the Silk Road. And it's very clear from his text that he was advertising it and not just asking a question, because he has these very flavorful words. I came across this website called Silk Road. It's a TOR hidden service that claims to allow you to buy and sell anything online anonymously. I'm thinking of buying off of it, but wanted to see if anyone here had heard of it or could recommend it. And he gives information on how to visit it. And it's very clear from the way he wrote it, it sounds more like an advertisement than someone just asking a question about it. But that was the very first reference I could find to Silk Road on the internet. Then on Bitcoin Talk, there was someone posting and asking about it as well, and pointing out that the Silk Road exists, and seeing if anybody's actually used it. Then also on Bitcoin Talk, later on, let's see, he's basically describing it again, and it's the same username, different form, same username, Altoid. And you want to know what people thought about it. But once again, it sounds very much like an advertisement. Then later on, Altoid, again on Bitcoin Talk, started looking for an IT pro in the Bitcoin community. And here's where it got dumb. He said, contact me at rossulbricht@gmail.com. That is some OPSEC fail from hell right there. So, yeah, that tied the first mention of Silk Road ever that could find on the internet to a handle named Altoid, and Altoid to an email address belonging to Ross. So, yeah, that was pretty bad. Also, a few other things point out. Dread Power Roberts posted a lot about his economic philosophy on the Silk Road, and Ulbricht and Ross both had an interest in the Mises Institute and what's known as the Austrian School of Economics. So they had similar interests, kind of like Jeremy Hammond let loose too much of his personal life. Well, Ross did the same thing. And as I said, he just mentioned the same things that Ross mentioned, so that kind of narrowed it down to him possibly. That's not necessarily a firm thing. But you get enough little pieces of evidence together, apparently you can get a court order. Also, another thing he did that was kind of screwy, Ross Ulbricht account was posted on Stack Overflow, and he was asking for help with some PHP code for connecting to a Tor hidden service. And he quickly changed his username to Frosty, but the first username he used was Ross Ulbricht. I don't know why, but that's what he did. So guess who is the main suspect at this point for Dread Pirate Roberts? Ross William Ulbricht. And that's about the expression I would have on my face too if I was the main suspect for that. What is it, 1.2 billion, and the FBI takes interest. All right. Someone was connecting to a server that hosts the Silk Road from an internet cafe that was nearby Ross. They started looking into it. And I think they also found that he had been logging into Gmail from the exact same place. Most were in the Pacific time zone. This becomes like death by 1,000 paper cuts eventually. Yeah, the IP of the Silk Road server was attached to via a VPN server that was connected to from an IP belonging to an internet cafe on Laguna Street in San Francisco, from which Ulbricht had connected to his Gmail account before. This more ties. There was a PM to Dread Roberts from a user that said the site was leaking some sort of external IP address. This is kind of fairly common on some web applications. If you type in the right things and they don't do proper sanitization, you can figure out what the internal IP address is. The IP address in this case belonged to the VPN. Yeah, eventually though, the FBI was able to find some of the servers and start getting hard drive images of them. How they initially found them completely, I'm not sure. I don't know if they used the previous bug, if they exploited the box. There's a lot of conjecture. Nicholas Weaver conjectures that they exploited the box and got in. However, there's also a story I read about someone contacting, making sure I have time, someone contacting Ross about wanting to sell a whole bunch of cocaine, I believe it was, and Ross put him in contact with one of his forum admins, or one of his employees, and that employee was going to buy it, but he bought it through his own house, and then the FBI was able to land on him at his own house. Now they have someone who works for the Silk Road, who probably had access to server infrastructure, so they may not have had to hack anything. They may have just followed where the drugs went, said, oh, you work for the Silk Road? You work for us now. Let us into the boxes. And they got hard drive images, and we're able to start monitoring more. Another big problem, let me see if I have it on here. No, it's a later slide, I think. Another problem that he ended up having was he had ordered a bunch of fake IDs. And these got intercepted coming across the border, like 9 IDs with different names. But they all had Ulbricht's picture on them. Homeland Security found these, and they went to go talk to him. And he denied having ordered them. I mean, I've seen a lot of documentaries on people escaping prosecution 10 minutes, and generally denying everything is a good call. The next thing he did, I don't understand, though. The denying thing, that's all good. But however, he apparently is alleged to have said, Ulbricht volunteered that hypothetically anyone could go onto a website named Silk Road on TOR and purchase any drugs or fake identity documents the person wanted. Why the hell would you admit that? Why would you say that? But yeah, that started pulling them back to him. And by the way, his roommates, when the people showed up, the Homeland Security folks, knew him as Josh and not his real name. So, also fake IDs with someone else, with your face on them. What reason would other people have to buy those? It's framing you in some way, I suppose, but it seems like there's better ways to do that. Also, one of those servers that they ended up getting control over had Frosty at Frosty in one of the keys. And he'd used Frosty's before as a handle. And eventually they took down the site, and they landed on him in a library right after he entered his password on his laptop for same reasons as, I suppose, the previous gentleman. More info on these particular articles. Nate Anderson did a great write-up. I believe that was for Ars Technica, and Agent Christopher Tarbell did some of the best court document stuff I've read. Lessons learned: keep online identities separate. If he'd kept his interest to himself, that probably would have helped. Also, if he hadn't used Tor from the same locations he was logging into his Gmail, that would help some also. Not using the same handles multiple places would help. Having a consistent story would help, like his roommates knowing him as Josh. Don't talk about interests. Don't volunteer information like I have no idea why he said, theoretically you could buy this on Silk Road. Demos, I have a little bit of time for some demos, so let me illustrate some of the things I was mentioning about possible ways of de-anonymizing people. There's a couple things you can do. Not everything that a person is necessarily going to open is going to respect the proxy settings on the local machine. So let's say you're accessing something over Tor, and I try to convince you, hey, go to this one particular website and download this Word doc. It's all safe and good. Go ahead and do that. Well, depending on how your browser is set up, it may not respect the proxy settings. Now I'm trying to connect to Tor right here, and hopefully this comes up within a reasonable amount of time. I should have had that up earlier already. Okay, that's up. Let me say I visited this particular site. Tracking doc, and this is a little Word doc. I've embedded an image in it. Since then, John Strand has shown me a better way of doing this, but I'm still using the image format for right now. So I'm doing it all over Tor browser. I got the Word document. I'm going to open it. And yeah, it's a trap. Yes, it's a trap. And hi there, image. Yes, I need to register. I know. I'm sorry, Microsoft. Tor, hi there. And now if I went to a certain page I have set up for tracking, let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, sniff that password real quick. Not much you can do it right here. You notice I now have the IP address, the world IP address of whoever was accessing it. I think. I hope that's one of those IP addresses. Anyway, that's hopefully what I got right there, and I can do a correlation tag of when it was downloaded from the servers over Tor versus when I see this. Another option, by the way, if you want something more professional than my little ghetto doc file, there's something called Honey Scripts. I'll get to it in a second. Honey Docs. My friend Marcus J. Carey runs it. And I've made a bunch of fake documents for it. I'm calling this one creditcards.zip. And hopefully if it downloads, if you open up any of those, it gives you options like Excel files, Word docs, and so forth. And it's being really slow to download right now. So I'm just going to switch over to the screen where it is. And right here, I could go in there and see who opened the iDocs via the real IP address. Except for it's probably logged me out by now. Y'all can watch this for a second. Everybody close your eyes. Let's see. Not that long a password. Y'all can guess it. Remember it. I feel bold. Do your thing. Okay. And there's my DEF CON demo, and there's various people who've accessed it. I asked people to access over TOR. That should probably be their real IP address unless they're doing various things to make Word somehow respect the proxy settings, which is a possibility. How much time we got now? 5 minutes. Okay. If I was to open this up and look at the documents in it, I would basically get more of the same thing. So you see ODT, like Open Office Document, XLS, and a few other formats. But you get the idea. Basically, Marcus's tool is a much more professional way of doing it than what I had before. But I can also view those things like where I always show TOR log. So let me go down to another thing that you can do to mess around with people. I have a hidden service set up at this location. So this is going to be a race condition to see who can hack my site first. Right here, this is running Mutilidae. Mutilidae is deliberately vulnerable scripts, and I find it's very, very easy to write deliberately vulnerable PHP code. Currently, it's been taken over by Jeremy Druin, who's a much better coder than I am. But if the website has vulnerabilities, there's different attacks you can do to possibly de-anonymize them. And I'll show you a few of them right now. I'm just going to describe this one because of time. This one, I'm doing an command injection attack and telling it to ping an IP address. If I was that IP address, I could sit there, sniff my connection, and see who's actually pinging me to figure out who they really are. Another option might be, TOR is acting way, way slow in here right now. Let me see, broken, insecure, sensitive. I'm looking for insecure direct object references. I'm opening that one too. So this demo may or may not work. I have videos of this online. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm using a vulnerability where I can do command injection. I can have it trace route to me and see the IP addresses along the path and hopefully figure out who someone is. However, TOR on this network is running pathetically slow. Believe it or not, I did demo it earlier. But the idea is basically you can get command injection, you can get that remote box to contact you back. And if anybody really wants to see it, I got about 3 minutes, don't I? 2 minutes. Oh, question? Yes? Then I would get the IP address of the VPN server, assuming that it's not like a split VPN tunnel. I'd get the IP address of the VPN server. It might get me a few notches closer, but yeah, it wouldn't be instantaneous.
Question?
Yes?
Is there any advantage to trying to sort of engineer your TOR network so that you're bouncing through various jurisdictions that are opposite to one another?
Maybe, but I haven't really looked into it. I mean, in theory, I guess maybe, because I know there's some control you can do over which nodes you hop through. Yeah, it looks like my TOR connection is not doing that well. If anybody wants to see this, I have videos on my website about doing this. But essentially, it's just injecting and making that remote box contact you back. You can also do it via remote file include, like have it suck up a file from another website you control and have it deliver up the IP address that way as well. And I have had videos in the past of that working. But unfortunately, I am out of time and TOR is going very slow for me. So I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm around.